My guest today is Amrit Dheer, who works in business development as a partner development manager at Google. Amrit joined Google in a non-legal capacity directly out of law school, which is relatively unusual, and we'll hear more about the story behind that and how he was able to convince Google to take him on in our interview. Amrit, it's a real treat to have you. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start out just by learning a little bit about your background. Can you tell us how old are you, what's your academic background, and where have you worked in the past?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 30 years old now. I did my bachelor's in international studies at Emory University, graduated in 2006, and then I moved back to Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, to be a rock star, and that's not really a joke. And I failed at that, and then did a number of random jobs. I worked for an acting school, which was one of my least fulfilling jobs ever. And then I should say I worked for 2 summers in Vienna for an Emory Study Abroad program. And it was actually in those summers where I developed a taste for not just international travel, but really international living and working. And so a year after graduating, I moved back to Vienna, worked again, and then moved to the Netherlands to do a master's. And this time it was a master's in media culture. And while I was there, I also had a couple different jobs. I was working as a journalist of sorts, and I was also working for the university in their India initiative, which was a way to get me to my next plan, which was to go to India. And so in India, I was there for 2 years. I volunteered through a fellowship called IndyCorps for the first year, and then I worked for that Dutch university, Maastricht University, the second year. And in the backdrop of all of this was that I had gotten into law school and had deferred 2 years to live in India. And so after those 2 years, I moved to Boston and started at Harvard Law School. And then I was there for 3 years and was working at Google, which I'll tell you more about, for the last 2 years of that time. And since then, I graduated in 2013, and I've since then been finally, after a long romance, I've finally been full-time at Google for about a year now.
Awesome. So a lot of different interesting, eclectic kind of twists and turns along the way. Tell us a little bit more about, like what were those, key points in how your career path unfolded and, has taken you to your current role at Google, and what were the thought processes you went through at those, at those key moments from the rock star gig to acting school to abroad and ultimately to Google? Like, take us back to that time and help us sort of understand that journey.
It's a good question, and it's not one that I always give the same answer to. I think that just kind of speaks to the complexity of those decisions, as well as of our attempt to actually understand our own decisions. I can't say that I know exactly what I was thinking or what I'm thinking now, but I'll try. And I think one thing for me is that I just follow what I'm excited about. And so in the beginning, that was music had a big part of that, and international living and experiences and learning. I mean, it's really, I think maybe two driving factors for me are, and I'm thinking about this right now, are curiosity and adventure. And maybe they're the same thing, who knows? But I've never made a 5-year plan, and I just kind of follow what feels right, and it's usually something that's pretty different than what came before, and it's also usually something that that involves some uncertainty and some ambiguity.
Sure. So you graduate from college, and the first thing you do is to go be a rock star. Well, like, what does that mean? I guess what was that about? Like,
there's no clear path to that. There's a couple things going on here, and again, like I said, this is a lot of what I'm going to say to you is different from how I would have answered this question maybe 5 years ago, different from how I would have answered at the time.
Sure.
Because we pick and choose when we look back, pick and choose the things that speak out to us and the things that also seem consistent. Sure. And therefore we lose a lot of the rough edges and and in that the truth. So this is what I think is the truth. Part of it is that music has always been a big influence for me and a big passion for me, and maybe that's part of growing up in LA and being star-eyed like that. But I'd written my own music and never been much of a technician in that I was never like fantastic at any instrument, not guitar, but I played a couple different instruments and I also enjoyed composing. And so really it was about wanting to be creative. And so when I graduated from Emory, and then I worked in Vienna for 2 months and then came back home. So or 3 months, and I came back home in September. I started just writing more music and reaching out to bands on Craigslist and trying out to be their lead singer and failing over and over again. But really, I mean, it was just kind of consistent with what I'd done before. And at the same time, I was also looking for something to pay the bills. And that's how I landed the acting school job.
And what
was not acting.
Okay.
What was that?
And what was that job? And yeah,
it was terrible.
Okay.
I probably should not name the place.
Okay,
but it was.
Sure.
I was the assistant director of admissions, I think, for this acting school,
Oh, wow.
and I would go to. I would do a number of different things. One of them was going to high schools in the greater Los Angeles area and stand right beside the Army and the Marines and the Navy and convince high school students they shouldn't go to college, but they should go to acting school, which I had very mixed feelings about.
Is this one of those Los Angeles specific things?
I don't think this job exists anywhere else.
Okay.
It wasn't a bad job because it was a bad place. It was a bad job for me.
Sure.
And so I actually, what I ended up doing, basically 9 hours a day was a lot of fantasy basketball. And I think I did really well that year in my various leagues. And applying to this master's program in the Netherlands and applying for a scholarship. Which I don't think I would have gotten had I not had all this time to review my essays and everything else while at work. And I haven't had a job like that since. A job where you sit in front of your computer
Sure.
and Google. I mean, I Google now, but it's a different kind of Google.
Sure.
But just like browse the internet all day long.
So I guess after you graduated, you tried to break into the music industry a bit. You worked in the acting school, and that was the first year out of college. And then the next year, you went to get your master's.
Exactly. The extra kink in there is that my boss, I guess, and also a really good friend, Peter, who had been working on this Emory Study Abroad program, which is only in the summers, he had asked me to come back the next summer. So the summer after I graduated, I worked for him, and he said, come back the next summer. I said, Peter, I might be touring the world with my rock band. And all of this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, or maybe a lot bit. Can I let you know by February? And then come February, I was like, I'm working at this acting school. Oh, I had taken the LSAT. That was the other thing. Sorry, that's important. In January of that year, so 2007, I took the LSAT. I took a practice test and loved it. And I just took this diagnostic and I scored pretty well. And I just love doing logic games. And so I told the acting school, who had already given me an offer, I said, can I start in February? Because I want to take the LSAT. And so I just spent like 3 weeks just doing, I think I did like 50 LSATs. And it made it hurt because I scored higher on my first diagnostic than I did on the actual test. But loved it. And that was another piece of the puzzle, which is probably going to be questions you're going to ask me later on as to why I went to law school. One of the reasons is I just really like taking the LSAT, which is a terrible reason to go to law school.
Okay, cool. So you did the acting school thing for a while, and then you packed your bags and went off to the Netherlands for the master's program. And that was a year-long program?
Yep, that's right. It was technically 12 months, but it was broken down so that the first 4 months or 5 months were coursework, and the next semester was actually your choice of an internship, a group project, or a master's thesis. And I ended up doing a combination of the first two, and I started a website called Composers, which again speaks to the music interest, and this was about the intersection of music and literature. And what we basically did was I published a short story written by an aspiring author, who is now no longer aspiring, but an awesome author. and I published it on what was then the internet of 2007 or 8, 7, 8. And then I had musicians submit pieces of music that were influenced in some way by that short story, and we ended up having 23 submissions from 5 different countries, and had a winner. But anyway, details aside, the whole point of that was this interplay between music and literature, but also between old media and new media. So it was a website, and it was people composing their own music and recording online, but it was largely publicized through offline means. And I ended up writing a paper about that experience and so on. So that's somewhat related, I guess, to what I do now.
Got it.
Really.
Got it. Cool. So then you go from the master's to, was there time between the master's and law school, or did you go straight?
Yeah. So I ended up applying to law schools when I moved. I moved to the Netherlands and started applying for law schools. Then you apply. I think I got everything in before the end of October, and then did the rest of my master's. And when I got in, and chose to go to Harvard, I asked for a deferral because I knew, and I actually knew this before I even applied to law school, I knew that I wanted to go to India. And so, man, this is hard to make these things concise, but long story short there, my parents were born in East Africa. I was born in Los Angeles. We have very little family in India. In fact, most of the family that we had, I had never met until I moved to India. Most of my family's in London, LA, and Vancouver. I knew I wanted to move to India for a variety of reasons, and I knew I wanted to do some sort of service work. And I found this wonderful this wonderful organization called IndieCorps, and applied for that at the same time as applying for law school, or actually a little bit later, the same year, and deferred law school for that reason. So then off to Delhi. I went from Maastricht, a city of 200,000 people, to a city with 100 times as many people, which was crazy. And then spent 2 years there, or 2 years in India.
Got it. So in IndieCorp in India, what city were you in India?
I was based in Delhi, but there was a bit of travel, both to various workshops throughout the country, as well as to villages in the north, in the Himalayas, where a lot of my students either had either grown up or their families had come from, so they're native villages, as they would say. I spent a bit of time up there as well, but mostly I was in Delhi.
Got it. And what was the nature of the work you were doing with IndieCorps, and what are they about?
So IndieCorps is an amazing organization to bring people to India to do service work for a year, and it's very focused on being grassroots oriented and on Gandhian values like simple living. We live in our communities, and we small details. It's a stipend of 2,000 rupees a month, which is about $40 a month. But that only speaks to one component of it, which is basically about living very simply and practicing what you preach, I suppose, is a good way to put it. And through IndieCorps, IndieCorps is the fellowship organization, but the NGO that I was working with is called Manzil, which is a youth empowerment and learning center in Delhi, working with youth from lower income backgrounds and giving all sorts of classes like English, math, computers, things that are very practical, but also things that are, I'm not going to put these in buckets, but also music and painting and theater. So I was mostly spending my time with Manzil, and my role there was more than just volunteering. I was teaching English, but I was doing much more than that. I was there to help transition the organization from a model where it was reliant on the founders, the founding family of 3, to one that was sustainable beyond their departure. They were planning to move to the mountains, so that it could be run by its students and former students, so that the NGO could run itself even without the founding family being there. And that's what I did for that year.
I see. Okay, cool. So, and by the way, sorry, the name of the organization was Munzil or Bunzil? How do you spell that?
Manzil, and you can check out the website, munzil.in, which if you're if you see this soon and maybe forever, is the website that I helped create, which is very, very, very simple.
Cool.
They made so you can check it out. They probably maybe they're going to improve that at some point, but that's not really the point.
Cool. So after two years in India, right? You were 2 years in India?
Yeah. So in the second year, it was a different experience, and I was working for Maastricht University to set up an office in Bangalore. So I was actually living in Bangalore for a year, but also traveling a bit.
Oh, I see. So like setting up like a development office or a student recruitment office, or
we were setting up what ended up being called. Well, we were setting up a branch of what would be Maastricht University's India Institute. The university had decided many years beforehand that India was a big strategic initiative for them, much more than any other country actually outside the Netherlands or outside of, I should say, the EU. And I had gotten involved in this when I was a student there, actually in large part knowing that I wanted to go to India and trying to find a way to get there. I found my way to the central university where they were planning this initiative. And the Bangalore office was set up for a number of things. I guess the two most important of which are partnerships. So partnerships with different other Indian universities, so that there's research collaboration and other kinds of relationships, and recruiting. So initially we were focused on master's and PhD students from India to the Netherlands. India, as you can imagine, has an enormous so many students, an enormous number of students, and it's difficult to have all those students, finding all the opportunities and needs and collaborations that they all in one place. It's a bad sentence, but you get the idea. And the idea was not to encourage brain drain, but to encourage what we called brain circulation. So having Indian students come to the Netherlands and learn about that culture and that economy and that academic environment, and bring those things back to India or bring it to other parts of the world. So yeah, I would say partnerships and recruiting, but I think a special kind of recruiting.
Got it. Cool. So then you go to law school at Harvard, which I guess means you're really dumb. But
man.
You spend 3 years there. And then you joined Google straight away. I'd love to probe in to understand exactly how did you even first get connected up to Google in law school, which is like a pretty atypical path, as I understand. And how did you then parlay that into actually making that your first full-time job on the business side, which is sort of not just one jump but two. The first jump is from law to business, and the second jump is from, I guess, industry-wise into technology. How did you not find them? I assume you know who Google was by then, but how did you get connected into them in the first place, and how did you actually turn that into a job opportunity?
So that's a big question with a very big answer. So definitely jump in and stop me and ask me to clarify.
Sure. Well, maybe what's the poor man's version first, and then we can maybe.
Okay, let's do that. The framework, the skeleton of it is that I was very lucky to get a legal internship first. So in my first year of law school, as most first years tend to do after December, I was looking for jobs, and I knew I wanted to be in the Bay Area. I knew I wanted to be either with I shouldn't say that. It's not entirely true. But I thought that I was interested in working with a technology company or startup, or in a completely different bucket of things. I thought I would be working internationally and doing public interest work. Well, public interest means something different when you talk to law students. Stuff that makes the world a better place is how I think of it. And I got a legal internship with Google with a team within legal that's called Global Ethics and Compliance. And so the skeleton version, I stick to that. Ended up doing an internship with them for 2 months. While I was there, loved that team and still love them. But I found another team that was doing work that I was kind of interested in longer term, and that was called at the time New Business Development. And I managed to finagle my way over. Finagle, I think, has negative connotations, but I nicely found my way over to that team And through a lot of, again, through luck and just good people supporting me and advocating for me, was able to secure an arrangement where I was working part-time during the school year in the Boston office, which they call the Cambridge office, because it's in Cambridge, which is very confusing for our Europe and UK colleagues. During the school year, part-time in Cambridge, and then full-time in the summer in Mountain View. And that was the arrangement up until last August, when I started full-time on what the NBD, the new business team, became, which is product partnerships.
Got it. Okay, cool. Super awesome sort of high-level overview. A couple questions that I had. So the first internship that you had with the legal department, did they come on campus, or did you reach out and find them?
No. I don't know the number, but I think it's like over 1,000. The number being the number of applicants that they get for this legal internship position, of which my year, I believe there were 11 or 14 actual interns. So it's a complete shot in the dark. There's a form that you fill out, there's a portal, I guess it's the Google Jobs site, that goes live, I think, December 1st. And there's a couple buckets. One is the MBA internship, of which there are many more. I think at the time, there was 150 MBA interns.
For business students, like MBAs.
Exactly.
For business students.
MBAs, there's 100, but we're all grouped together. It's real, and some people actually call it the MBA program, and the JDs are kind of just tagged along. But there's my year, and don't quote me on these numbers, although I guess I'm quoting myself. There were around 150 MBA interns and 11 JD interns. And in this kind of interesting situation where the MBA interns are working for conversion, they're working for jobs, and they have a high, I don't know what the numbers are, or I do, but I probably shouldn't say, but they are optimistic about getting a job at Google after they finish business school. And then you have the JD interns, who are all first year summers, which means they have 2 more years of law school, and we're told pretty directly at the beginning, there's no way you're going to start here after law school. And that's why structure a program that way if it's not designed to be a recruiting funnel? And what is the purpose of it? And secondly, it sounds like you applied to them. They didn't come to Harvard Law School to recruit. No,
right?
no,
okay.
They don't. They do go to MBA programs to recruit. So they go to Harvard Business School. They don't go to Harvard Law School.
So you just went onto the website at google.com and then applied for a job there.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
But first, and this is important for everyone who might be trying to figure out their own careers. First, I tried to find out everyone I could find out who worked at Google and talk to them first before I fill out any form. And that's the way you should do it.
For a referral, or to understand what it's like to work at Google, or both?
But I didn't know that I didn't know what the internal referral process looked like. It ended up being to my advantage that I did it before I filled out the form. But I was just trying to get information, just trying to learn how Google is organized, how these internship programs work, and then also how legal is organized. And so I ended up talking to, I think, at least 5 or 6 people, maybe more, and at least 2 of which were in legal that I had an indirect connection to. You talk to someone and they say, oh, you should talk to person X. He's in legal and he can tell you about how that organization is structured. So I did that first. What was the question?
I see. So you were essentially doing informational interviews with people, but actually ended up also, it sounds like, getting a referral before you even applied. Is that right? Or
yes,
somebody on the inside who could watch out for you?
That's right. We figured this out recently. Because Google has a policy where if you refer someone and then they apply, or rather, if you refer someone and they end up coming to Google as a full-time employee, then you get if a Googler refers someone, then they get a kickback. They get some amount of money. If 2 Googlers refer you, then they have to share the same pot of money. And so actually just like a couple months ago, we were trying to figure out, because my process had been so long, I was referred back in 2010, and then I actually started as a full-time employee in 2013, 3 years difference, and one of my referrers said, hey, I only got half the money I was supposed to get. I said, I must have had another referrer. So I ended up having 2, but I know I talked with many more than that. So both for my end, it was more informational, and it ended up being referrals as well.
Got it. So it sounds like that really helped you stand out from the crowd among the 1,000+ people who applied for this job, the internship. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks for me. I should say it speaks to kind of just curiosity. I mean, on one hand, like I know people who work there. Why wouldn't I want to know how things are organized? But also, from a career standpoint, I'm sure all the books on networking and careers say this. It's amazing how much an actual interpersonal interaction matters. Resumes only say so much. Cover letters say a lot less.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
why? I'm just curious. Why does Google even have this program if it's not designed to be a recruiting funnel?
So I should say, and because I talked to recruiting before, I talked to people internally at Google first, that I'm not a Google spokesperson and I do not know the exact reasons. But I can tell you as a former law student why it makes sense. As a law student, your second year summer job is your internship or associateship is really the one that is kind of set up to be where you will hopefully work when you graduate. So most people who go to work for a law firm will have summered at that law firm in their 2L summers, the summer after their second year. That keeps your first year summer open to do something else. And one of the pieces of advice that I've been given early on as a law student and that I give to other law students is if you're not sure that you want to work for a law firm, don't work for a law firm your first summer. I think that's really good advice. If you do know, if you love litigation, whatever, go do it. But if you're not sure, it's a good idea to do something else. And I think Google and I'm sure other employers who know that they cannot take law students straight out of law school, and for whatever those reasons may be, I think for most in-house positions, for most companies, it's that they want you to get the training that you get at a law firm for whatever it is, 3-5 years before you come in, so that they don't train you themselves, because being a lawyer is really a lot of it is about learning on the job. Then it only makes sense to take someone as an intern in their first summer, because if you take them in their second summer, you're taking away an opportunity from them to work at a law firm, which could hurt them in the end because they won't have that offer in their pocket at the end of that summer.
Got it.
So, yeah,
I see. So
it's a little bit of inside baseball for law students. It's more of a law student consideration than it is Google saying, no, we want to make this difficult for you.
So the idea then is that you kind of plant the seed so that they kind of think about Google 3 to 5 years down the road after they've had law firm experience. Is that?
I'll tell you what a Google or lawyer had told me at the time. I don't know if this is the official line from Google. Actually, I should say that I know it isn't because it's mine. We have work to do. Like we could use the extra hands. So it's great to have legal interns here. B, it's great to have that relationship, whether you end up at Google 5 years down the line or somewhere else. It's just it's good to have our seeds everywhere, and see there's a good experience component. Like the experience you get working in-house is unique. It's different from working at a law firm. It's different from non-legal work. And so if A and B work out, if A and B point in one direction and C is benefiting the person, great.
Cool. So then you mentioned that you befriended some folks in the new business development group, and then you found your way over to that group. How exactly did that happen?
Yeah. Okay. So this one is one where I'm going to have to be very mindful, because this is the question you may not be surprised that I get a lot, and I always tell the truth, but I only tell the parts that I remember or that seem relevant at the time, which makes for a less complete story. So let me try. First of all, I should say that I knew going into law school actually that I was not interested in being a lawyer for very long, if at all. So I knew that. That was reaffirmed basically in week 2 of civil procedure, when I realized I really did not want to be a litigator and probably didn't want to be a lawyer. But I still enjoyed law school and still thought it made sense, and I gained a lot out of it. So that's the context going in. And then during my legal internship, my director, so my manager's manager, used to send out an email from the new business development group at Google that would lay out in a very nice kind of chart or not really a chart, but it would lay out what everyone was working on in that group. So at the time, I should explain, the new business development was a team of, I think, about 80 people all throughout the world in different Google offices, as well as in some remote areas, working on all early stage projects, products and projects at Google across product areas. So they're kind of the business ninjas in a way. They kind of roll onto projects and roll off of them, would be involved where needed, and in some cases would be completely embedded in a team. So a very kind of nimble group, and also incredibly exciting. So I would get this email every week and just see all the things that they were working on, from encouraging entrepreneurship in Palestinian territories to working on Maps and Maps API, or working on Chrome, and I mean, across the board, and just really interesting projects and working with very interesting partners. And I just thought that was cool. And so Google has a pretty good internal database where you can find out who works on what team. I started kind of looking at that very closely, and tried to meet with people. Google's got, I think, a very good culture of, has been able to retain, as a big company, a very good culture of openness and transparency, but also just of being welcoming, and people are happy to talk with you for coffee, for lunch, for whatever. Another thing that Google has is 20% projects. And my manager in ethics and compliance within legal had been very comfortable, or had been actually encouraging, I should say, of my taking on a 20% project. And so this I did not just with new business development, but with other areas that I was interested in. I've coming from my music background, I thought I was interested in copyright, and so I reached out to our chief copyright counsel. I don't know if that's his exact title, but Fred von Lohman, and did a project under him. And actually, one of the problems was that I'd reached out to so many people for 20% projects in my first 4 weeks, and projects they don't come in right away. That there was 1 week in my, I think, 7th week, where I had 4 or 5 20% projects. And
it's like 100% project.
Yeah, I was basically at like 180% in my time at Google. I actually ended up spending 40 hours one weekend doing work, which is not googly. I remember my fellow intern who I lived with was like, "That's not googly. You should not be working." But that was my fault, and ended up being a good thing.
So how did the transition point actually happen?
So this is where it gets a little complicated, and this is where there's a lot of details, and I can't say which one contributed the most, but it's a combination of things. 1, reaching out to people and talking with them. 2, offering myself up for a 20% project. 3 is almost certainly one of the most important. Is just I was lucky. The people that I talked to there were awesome. I think I could probably say names in this case. Kathy Gordon and Megan Smith were senior Googlers, have been here for a long time, and in positions of leadership, were just willing to take a bet on me, which was amazing. And then one thing that I often forget to tell people when I am asked this question, that probably was more influential than I remember, is that I actually wrote a letter to must have been to HR and to a number of people. I think Megan and Kathy may have been on that letter as well, that email, not really a letter, where I informed them that I had talked to Harvard's registrar, which I had, and looked into what it would take to take a leave of absence. And I wrote them an email in the context of a position that was open for someone with just a bachelor's and 3 to 4 years of experience, saying I would take a leave of absence from Harvard, even indefinitely. And I was very careful about how I worded this, because I wanted to communicate that basically I'm really willing to drop out of law school for this, because I love what your team does. I think it's what I want to do, and it speaks to me. It's exciting. And I should say that one of the things that I'd heard from one of the people that I talked to in this team was that the things that are important to this team are being entrepreneurial, having international experience, and negotiation skills. And so I spoke to those 3 things in my letter, and luckily I had international easy. Negotiation skills, it's a little bit harder to talk about, but I talked about experience that I had beforehand. And entrepreneurial I could talk about. some of the crazy things I'd done before, both with Maastricht University as well as others. Um, so I think that letter was probably influential as well. I put myself out there, and I remember that when I actually did secure kind of the internship over during the school year, one of my now colleagues came up to me and she's like, "Don't drop out of law school. That would be a big mistake." So I think someone else said you should, let's see if there's a way you can have your cake and eat it too, and that ended up working out. So I guess if I were to sum it up, I'm sure there's another factor in that I haven't thought of, and then I'll think about later in the interview.
Those are probably the main ones, but it sounds like all's well that ends well. Cool. Yeah. That's super, super helpful background. And just sort of for the folks who are maybe a little bit unfamiliar with Google's BizDev or partnerships development organization, what do you do in that role currently, day to day, and what's it like working for Google, and what do you find most exciting?
So NBD, New Business Development, has since been rolled into the larger partnerships org. But what we do is actually still pretty similar to what we did then. So the general partnerships org, product partnerships, I should specify, works with different product areas. So working with the product teams and eng teams to develop to. Let me rephrase that. Actually, there's an easier way to explain this. What I do today is very similar to what I used to do in NBD. And that is, I would say, probably half business strategy. So early stage business strategy. There's a new product that's being worked on, something new that's being built. We would like to have a business mind look at it and contribute. So we're a resource to teams that would like that kind of expertise or insight. And then the other half, I would say, is partnerships, where it's come to the point where we need to partner with third parties, whether we're licensing their data or we are having them offer their services over our platform, whatever it may be. There's tons of these kinds of arrangements. We are the link between that external party, the product team internally, and legal internally as well. So we do both those things.
Cool. And what's your sort of experience or impression of what it's like working at Google, and what you find most exciting about the job?
Oh man, I love it. I love it all. I love everything from. I love the stuff that people don't even like. I love looking at contracts and negotiating indemnities. But there's also the sexier stuff. I like learning because I should specify, my team works with 4 different groups at Google. Research, which is Google's research arm, which is a little bit different from other companies' research arms. Infrastructure, which is the data centers and all the kind of back end, or all the really important stuff. Google autonomous units, which are wholly owned subsidiaries, as well as just entities that are run separately from other product areas because they want to be more. We want them to be run like a startup. We want them to be separate for other reasons. They're also often in the category of early stage projects. Things like today, Google Fiber and Google Helpouts. And then Google X, which is Google's Moonshots lab, where things like the self-driving car and Google Glass have come out of. So one of the things that I really love about my job is that I'm learning about new industries, new products all the time, and I have to get up to speed on these things, often with really quick turnarounds. But it's exciting. It's different every month. I'm usually on anywhere from 2 to 5 products at a time. And that means, first of all, it means a lot of juggling and time management and clear communication. But it also means you get to learn a lot, and you're not just doing one thing every day.
Wow! So a lot of diversity. That's awesome. If you were to step back, sort of, and look at your career overall, what's the biggest learning you feel you've had in your career to date?
Ooh. That's hard.
I don't ask the easy questions.
yeah. I mean, I think it might be different for each person, but what I know is true for me is that things have gone well for me when I am true to my curiosity and ambition. Meaning, one can come up with any number of reasons not to ask the question or not to reach out to person X. But put those aside. If you want to know the answer to something, if you're curious about it, just go for it. And if you see something that you like and think you'd be good at, and think you'd be good at, think you'd want to do, try it. Even if you think you'd be bad at it, try it. Again, I don't want to downplay at all the role of luck in this, because I've been, I think, very lucky, and I think there are other contributing factors. One of which is that kind of thing is possible at Google. It's possible for someone with a JD to go into the business org, but also it's about. I can't deny that I've been very fortunate about the people who have advocated for me and the opportunities that have just fallen, in some cases, in my lap. But when they don't fall in your lap, go after them.
Sure, and it sounds like if I'm sort of interpreting correctly, in a way, at least in your case, the more curious you are and the more you've gone after things, the luckier you've gotten, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly.
Yeah, sure. There's a whole camp of folks, I think my dad probably included, who believe you make your own luck. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that yet. That's a deep philosophical question, and
sure.
It speaks to injustice and unfairness in the world. And if I were to attempt to go into that now, I would stumble.
Or just that it sounds like sort of the harder you work, the more you've teed yourself up to even catch opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, and that's an extra good one. Another good one to put in there, I think, with ambition, curiosity, luck, is hard work. I mean, working part-time during law school is not a simple thing. I guess I should say. To be fair, it's much simpler in second year and third year than it is in first year. Sure. I didn't have to do that, but I was working. Although I don't think I should tell HR this, but technically I was working 10 hours a week. In reality, I was working 20, 30 hours a week. And I was spending a lot of time in the office, and I was also going to all my classes because, again, consistent with the curiosity piece, I hate missing class, and I'm there, especially in 2L and 3L. Less true with Civ Pro, but in 2L and 3L, you choose your own classes, and I only chose classes I wanted to be in, which is also why, by the way, I didn't take evidence.
Cool. Amrit, where do you see yourself going ideally in the future, career-wise, and how do you think what you're doing today is going to help you get there?
I don't know, but I'm not too worried about it. I love what I'm doing now, and as long as I'm loving it, I'm going to keep doing it. If you had asked me, or many of the people who knew me well, that I would be at a large company 5 years ago, if you had asked me that, I would have said, well, I guess 5. Wow, time flies. I've been working here for 3 years, maybe 6 years ago. I don't know. I would say no. I would be at a startup. I would be at something smaller. But first of all, Google's not really a typical big company. It has done, I think, a good job. It's tough. It's a tough thing to do, but I think as good as any job at retaining some of that startup feel. And as well, I should be fair that some of the teams that I work with are kind of startups. Anyway, back to the question: where will I be? I don't know. I can tell you what. I can tell you that wherever I'll be and what I'll be doing will still be true to the elements of curiosity, ambition, and creativity. That's where the music part comes in, and there's creativity in what I do today, and that's an important piece. And maybe international. I don't know. That's one thing that I think isn't so much a component of my job today as it used to be. And I imagine I could see that coming back, because I think as many people who've lived abroad, you get the itch to be abroad again for the next adventure, to be speaking, language that's not your own. That I could see that coming and biting me hard.
Sure. Last question for you.
Yeah.
If you could just offer one piece of tactical advice to people who, are interested in a role like yours, or interested in, the experiences that you've had and maybe exploring some of those options themselves, what advice would you have for folks like that, for them to think about as they, just navigate their own careers?
It's a good question. It's funny. Maybe this is me just being. I hope it's not me being cagey, but I think it's me attempting to be precise, which is a very by the way, law student slash lawyerly thing to do. I think, in business schools, you learn to sum things up in a simple sentence that loses all the loose ends and is a general statement. This is true. I know this to be true. That there's a value in that, and it's good to have that to make for decisions purposes. It also leads to genocide.
Sure. But your advice to young people.
My advice, yeah. Sorry to be this is me being precise. I guess to wrap up all those things that I was talking about, curiosity and ambition and hard work and luck. Well, let's put that aside. Don't be afraid. I think that's maybe a good way to think about it. And it just came to me now, by the way. Don't be afraid. Just go for it. If you see something you're interested in, go for it. If getting the job means you have to work your butt off for a number of years, go for it. If it means picking up and leaving, although that's a little bit different. That's different for different people, different strokes, I guess. Don't leave your family behind. I don't have one of those. Well, I have one, but they bring me back to LA every now and then. Don't be afraid. That's what I'm going to go with.
Alrighty. Well, this was a great treat to catch up with you. It's always good hearing about your perspective and about kind of the journey that you've had from pre-Google days to now. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff too. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And have a good one. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.